Is the black consciousness ideology of yesteryear worth reviving? Was there full disclosure on Tiro and Steve Biko's deaths at the TRC? How important are the annual Tiro and Steve Biko memorial lectures? Is government doing enough in recognition of these fallen heroes? What time is it? It's question time. This year marks an important period in history of the Black Consciousness movement. 40 years ago, former Teflop University SRC President Abraham Ramutibi Tiro was killed by a South African security agent's letter bomb while in exile in Botswana. On 12 September 1977, Black Consciousness movement leader Mr. Steve Bantu Biko died in his Pretoria cell due to grievous bodily harm. But what makes these two struggle icons unique? My guests today are former ZAPO president, Mr. Laibon Mabasa, who is the current president of SOPA, the Socialist Party of Azania, and joining us from our Durban studios, Professor Seth Cooper, who's also a former ZAPO president. Now, gentlemen, welcome to the show. Prof, let me start with you there in Durban. When it is around 12 September, what comes to your mind? I remember reading that Biko actually approached you and the late Strini Moodley to say we need to ensure that the movement that we're trying to build includes and covers all those who are oppressed in South Africa.
Well, Mpo, when the 12th of September comes around, whether some of us like it or not, there is a serious focus on the life and times of Steve Biko. And invariably, discussions like this happen. And this, despite any official support of this day, as well as commemorating the life and times of OAR Tiro. The state government does not provide any support for these activities, but it goes down in this month that we celebrate our heritage as the most important until we come to the eve of the 24th of September when National Braai Day takes over. But effectively, from the second week of September for at least a week, Black consciousness, its ideology, its role is relived, and the hits that young people make on sites relating to Biko and relating to Black consciousness is enormous. So there is a crying need out there for people to want to investigate who they are through these teachings, and I think your initial question about its relevance is very pertinent right now. We have a need to look at Black consciousness, discover who we are, look at our past, and in order that we can shape the future. If we don't know who we are, how are we going to shape where we're going to be in the future?
Mr. Mabasa, let me perhaps with you talk about Tiro. You are former Teflop students. You were both expelled from the university. Who is Tiro, around this time? Let's talk about him and here.
Tiro, Abraham Ramutibi Tiro, is the rock around which the transformation or the birth of South Africa was built. Tiro was expelled at Teflop, as you would remember, and many other students were expelled with him who went to all high schools and became teachers and started teaching Black consciousness. And people like Tsietsi Mashinini, Khotso Sahlulo, and a host of other young people who led 1976 were the direct products of Tiro and his generation. And therefore, we think that without a person like Steve Biko on the other hand and Tiro, maybe things would not have fast-tracked in the manner in which they fast-tracked and other people benefited to become the leaders of the revolution, because in reality the real leaders of the revolution are the people you mentioned.
But don't you think that Biko and Tiro were young and therefore they had the energy at the time which could have, which radicalized the political environment at the time, and not necessarily that it was going to be sustained for long?
Well, it's the same. The argument you're putting is the same argument which for some time was put in the United States concerning Malcolm X. People said he belonged to an era that people would forget about him. And if we remember, Malcolm X was not revived by officialdom, was revived by young people in the streets of Harlem and other areas when they started saying the person who told our truth is Malcolm X. And suddenly there were X T-shirts, X caps everywhere. And today, Malcolm X occupies the center stage because what he said was precisely what the world needed to say, to hear, but precisely he had put an interpretation on the condition of black people in the United States, which was unassailed. And I think it's the same thing with Steve Biko and Tiro.
Let me add something important.
Yes, Prof.
I think it's a truism that until his death, Steve Biko was the emerging leader. He had to be killed because he was on a mission of uniting the various factions of the liberation movement. Steve Biko was the most renowned South African opponent of the then apartheid system. And his death created a new vacuum, like after the Rivonia trial, after Sharpeville, and then the Rivonia trial and the subsequent bannings of individuals and people going into exile and in prison. There was a hiatus from the early 60s till the late 60s, which was quickly filled by Steve Biko and many of us who were students at the time. After Steve's death, ironically, the path began to be open for the ANC in particular to fill the space. And they filled the space on the basis that, well, we told you so, the system is going to ban you. And all of us who were involved knew that this was going to happen, but we could not sit by idly. And that championing of our own rights and leading people against the apartheid system through the search for self-identity and self-actualization is the singular contribution Steve Biko has made. And outside of Mandela, the most well-known South African in terms of history is Steve Biko.
But Prof, do you think you would have had the same conversations that you had with Steve in the 70s today?
Oh yes, if you look at Steve's writings right now, he talks about the national question, he talks about the bourgeoisie, he talks about the rapaciousness, he talks about the corruption which you and others are covering in the media as we speak. He in a sense, predicated the issues of this country on a few simple epithets, one of which was, at the rendezvous of victory, you can't have half human beings. You need full human beings. And all around us, we see people who are shadows of themselves, have very little belief in themselves, have very little ability then to lead others in believing and realizing that democracy is 20 years old and we ought to be the harbingers of our own future. We leaving it to others to fill that space. If civil society right now is filled by the likes of AfriForum, then indeed this country has a lot to beware of, because surely that is not where we ought to be. We ought to be in a place where we're looking at our issues, majoritarian issues, not minority issues, in order that we can move and go beyond the legacies that we unfortunately have inherited.
Okay. When we return, I want us to talk about the threat that Tiro and Biko were to South African administration at the time. But for now, we're going to take a quick break. Please don't go away.
Technology is all around us and is improving lives across Africa, like how young Nigerians are connecting to the internet. There are doctors finding new ways to save lives in Cameroon, and the South African public transport system that is now getting Wi-Fi. We have gadgets, apps and loads more, some of which play a big role in Africa's growth. A huge part of this African growth is technological innovation. To find out a bit more about social media and technology news from here in Africa and abroad, join me, Siphumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back. You're still watching Question Time. Our guest today, Laibon Mabasa, President of the Socialist Party of Tanzania. And from our Durban studios, we're joined by Professor Seth Cooper, who is a former ZAPO leader himself. Now, Dr. Mabasa, how much of a threat were Tiro and Biko?
The apartheid system, the white minority rulers of our country at that time, were convinced that they have crushed all resistance and that they have placed fear as an overwhelming element in the lives, particularly of black people. That black people didn't need a policeman in their houses. They had become their own policemen. Please don't open that radio station. Please don't talk like that. Please don't dress like that. You'll go to jail. That had become sort of a norm. And suddenly, when Tiro, Steve Biko, Seth Cooper and others came into the scene, the first thing they had to deal with was to destroy that element of fear. Suddenly, these young people were not speaking in the manner in which they are expected to speak. If you read or get a video and listen to Tiro in Tefluop in that speech, suddenly the question was, how can he speak like that? How can he say the kind of things he's saying? The same thing with Steve Biko. If you read, I write what I like, but also listen to him in the SASO BPC trial. The challenges he put, he says to Rees, when Rees says, hey, you preaching confrontation, he doesn't say, no, I'm not preaching confrontation. He acknowledges. And he says, yeah, but you know what will happen? He says, there's no bloodshed, but I'm not agreeing with an iota. One thing you are saying, we are willing to confront you. And therefore, that spirit of confrontation, that spirit of taking issues forward, when Steve is asked about June 16, he describes it as the culmination of all the things they have said about black consciousness. And he talks about the decisiveness, the way things became very clearly defined, the way they knew who was the enemy and who was not the enemy, the way even in that situation, when nurses were going to hospital, even if there's a stay away, the students themselves will actually try to get a car, take a nurse to hospital and so on. It was the fearlessness, the decisiveness, and clearly the goal of what they wanted to achieve. CSC machine in its first words, one Azania, one nation, black power.
Professor Cooper, when you formed ZAPO, was it in a quest to continue what the BPC had failed to do, or was it just to take the struggle forward?
Well, actually, Laibon was key in the formation of ZAPO. I was in jail then. But it was very clearly to continue the work of the banned organizations. On the 19th of October, the various organizations and newspapers that were banned, including SASO, the BPC, and in April the following year, very short while, within 6 months or so, there was a new organization in place. Unlike the previous era, in April 1960, the ANC, the PAC, and various other formations were banned. And those remained banned until de Klerk announced his fateful decision in February 1990. So with the black consciousness groups of organizations, within a space of about 6 months, there was a new formation. But as I said, it allowed for the re-entry of the ANC, because the ANC in exile was an organization that was failing. It needed new blood transfusion, and that has been covered by various people, including Serote, historians and so on, saying it was a necessary period when the youth of SASO, BPC, went into exile, and they provided the new lifeblood for the ANC. So the ANC sent its cadres back. Those cadres who went out as BC activists came back as ANC operatives, and the rest is history. Okay. I think it's important to recognize that each epoch produces its own set of leaders, and in many ways, there was already in the 80s a toenadering between the apartheid state and the ANC, both within prison and in exile, and history bears that out. So there was a talking, and it was necessary to restrict further certain organizations that were not part of that process. But the BPC's vision was continued by Azapo. The big difference was speaking openly about creating one nation as Azania, rather than South Africa. And remember, Mpo, very few countries in the world call themselves by geographic names, and all three of them are in Africa, no other part of the world. It's Central African Republic, South Sudan, and South Africa. All other countries call themselves by a name, and the founding fathers of Azapo believed we should have a name, and that name ought to be Azania. There could have been another name, and maybe that failure to forge a united Azania is what we're confronting now, with greater ethnicity than we've ever been confronted before. You see people who've been granted chiefdoms fighting for narrow chieftainship rights. You see people from the former Bantustans claiming parts of this country. We don't have anybody saying, I am a South African. I first am a South African. I speak Sepedi or Sepulana or whatever, but I am a South African. You get somebody saying, I'm a Zulu, I'm a Pedi, I'm Indian, and so on. And that request for nationhood is the defining factor with Azapo, with all that it confronted in the late 70s and into the 80s.
All right. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, let's look at the annual memorial lectures, the Tiro one and the Steve Biko Memorial Lecture. For now, we're going to take a quick break. Please don't go away.
SABC News delivers stories
that unify the nation
in many ways. Stories that inspire us
to see the world differently, appreciate
and celebrate our diversity.
And mostly,
they make this place a better country to live in,
despite our color,
beliefs
or culture.
I
am
Mahendra Raghunath.
Tabile Ngwado.
Lulu Gabu.
Join us every day
as we provide updates on
local and international news
straight into your home.
We
are
SABC News.
Laibun Mabasa, the president of SOPA and struggle veteran, Professor Seth Cooper, are my guests today. Now, Ndati Mabasa, the annual memorial lectures, Tiro and the Steve Biko Memorial Lecture, like I'm saying, they happen annually. Is there any importance?
Let's start by correcting you when you talk about the failure of the BPC. actually the PPC succeeded beyond expectation. If you were to say the ANC started in 1910, became ANC in 1912, and even March 21 did not belong to them, you would not be able to immediately show success. The PPC was formed in 70, I think, and by 1976 they had literally turned the country upside down. They had created, you know, the SASIM group with the SASIM frown. And they would say they were the only ones who were not agreeing to stand in the queues because there are a few white people. They would push them aside and say, we came here first. So they actually succeeded beyond expectation. But coming to the question you are bringing, like I said right from the beginning, it's not the intellectuals, it's not the academics that are putting Steve Biko nor putting Tiro on the agenda of the country. It's what actually is happening on the ground. I hear people, even ANC members, say, you know, I got angry and my black consciousness came in. I don't know what they mean, but fact of the matter is that there is a movement that affected all people in this country. Yeah. Other people might represent what it said, but it created a mindset that said it was possible for us to do things and not wait for anybody and not wait for the guns from the Soviet Union or wait for that. You are talking about the people who led a generation that fought firepower with stones. That's the kind of commitment that was there. And therefore, because this call comes from the ground and intellectuals, academics are catching on it, and every year they make these contributions, they show, they get people to talk about Tiro, they get people to talk about Biko. I think there shall be a time when this will be so generalized that we'll not talk about them on the 1st of February and the 12th of September, but people are going to talk about them every day. And mark my words, I think that's going to happen.
Dr. Cooper, do you think where you are doing justice to the ideals that both Tiro and Biko stood for?
Undoubtedly, yes, because you've got to live your life doing the best you can under whatever circumstances and representing that quintessential truth that you see through the eyes of black consciousness. That I believe I do daily. Okay. And in whatever organizations I'm in, right now I am speaking to you from Durban because we're launching the Pan-African Psychology Union, and it's bringing people together on the basis of uniting on a common idea. Tomorrow evening we'll be giving the Steve Biko Award for Psychological Liberation to Frantz Fanon posthumously, and his daughter will be receiving it. So it's doing those things that speak to the essential truism that black consciousness created in us, and we are trying to share that with whoever wants to listen in the small ways that we can. Of course, we need a wider framework, we need some bigger institutional collaboration, and I think that time is ripe for Libon, for Nkosinathi Biko, for whoever is out there who believes in black consciousness, that we see the light. We need to share that light with the rest of the country, wherever they may be, urban, rural, throughout the length and breadth of this land, in order that we don't feel, I'm good, it's just that the people around me are not. So we need to spread that message, and I think the relevance of black consciousness is as great as it was before. In fact, more so. And like Libon is saying, we hear so many ANC people saying, where's black consciousness? We need that. We need a healthy dose of black consciousness.
They are divided.
That's true. That is true. And that's because there isn't an organizational framework that can deal with the psyche. We need to deal with half human beings, Mpo. Yeah. Right now, very few amongst us believe we're equal to anybody on God's earth. Many of us still believe we are non-something else. non-white. If you take the non out of non-white, you're left with white, and vice versa. We're not part of anybody else. We ourselves, who we are. And we should never ever be describing people in terms of others. We should be describing ourselves in terms of ourselves.
All right.
And it is time that all of us stood up and said, no more non-white, no more non-this and non-that, in order that we can progress.
Okay, thanks, Prof. Dr. Mabas, how possible is it that the movement can unite, as
the
is the
movement
principle?
of Biko.
Yes, the movement of Biko and Tiro.
Yeah, I think basically that failure, we must talk about it. Maybe even talk about all the elements. But in reality, if we don't do it, we who claim some form of leadership, we don't do it, I think it will come from the ground where the pressure will be much too much that Libon's special enclave that he has created becomes less important. We actually need that unity, not yesterday, not tomorrow. Actually, we need it today. And therefore, as the voice grows amongst our people and the pressures grow, I hopefully hope that there is a point where we will fight for that and probably nothing else in order to progress and go forward.
So far, what's the status quo?
He wants to say something.
Okay, let me allow you, Prof,
I just
very
want to
quickly.
add, I just want to add that there are more followers of Black consciousness now than in the organizations that Libon has referred to. And in many ways, I think it's about time that we did not play the narrow political game. So it's good that indeed Azapo has gotten no seat in parliament. Maybe we can come out of our high horses and deal with the bigger challenges. And that challenge is not to leave our people behind. It's to take our people to the place they need to be because we see the light, because we have that wisdom. Why not sharing it? Why not share it with those in power and those without power, the masses of our people?
Is it possible?
I think it's better said. I think it is possible. It is possible because the challenges that are facing our people now are even much greater. If you talk to other people who are not members of the Black Consciousness Movement, they are likely to tell you how important the Black Consciousness Movement is, how important Steve Biko is, how important even the book I write what I like is. And therefore, it is something to strive for. It's something that is possible. If we have failed as many times as we have up till now failed, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the road. I believe completely that there should be a point where the unity of our people and their organizations is achieved.
Dr. Mabas, Professor Satsukupa, thank you very much for the time. That was Question Time for today, and a big thank you to both my guests and to you for watching the show. Our email address is questiontime@sabc.co.za and our Twitter handle @questiontime24. From me and the crew, have yourself a wonderful time. Goodbye.
We bring awareness to our passengers about what Ebola is about, importantly, how it is transmitted, and the key thing about it is that it is not airborne.
Across the board, women are at risk of getting breast cancer, and the risk factors are in fact a family history, a strong family history of breast or ovarian cancer.
The plastic surgeon, the first thing he would check is your weight and would ensure that your body mass index is within the normal range. And if not, they probably would actually, suggest that you lose weight before you even consider having these procedures.
Catch Dr. Silo Mutaung on Health Talk every Saturday from 9 to 10 on SABC News.